Anyone else tired of talking about racism? Are you scared to talk about it? Well, hang on and buckle up. Let's talk about racism and how we deal with our feelings about it. Welcome home. You are home. Come on in. Tell me where you've been. I've been waiting for you, hoping that while we're apart, you felt loved and hopeful every moment in your heart. Welcome home. You are home. Come on in. Tell me how you've been. A belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. Also, doctrine or political program based on the assumption of racism and designed to execute its principles. Also, a political or social system founded on racism. And also racial prejudice or discrimination. You can thank Kennedy Mitchum, a black woman, for this new definition. It didn't used to include the middle parts about systemic racism, and Merriam-Webster changed it just in 2020. I show the definition because I feel like part of the struggle people have when talking about racism has to do with no common knowledge of the definition of racism and no common knowledge of the history of racism in this country. I'm not going to try to cover the history here, but I will link to some good resources down in the description box below. All right, let's talk today about how to deal with our feelings about racism while living in hierarchy that privileges one race above others. I grew up in an Irish Catholic neighborhood in Chicago. It was rough. My first experience of racism was people throwing rocks at me and calling me the N-word. They were like, "Hi, you nerd! How do you make 100% on every exam? You're making our kids look bad." Clearly I'm joking. The N-word they used was not as nice as nerd. I actually like nerds. I think nerds are cool. They were referring to my dark skin, and they felt justified in calling me that because at the time in the Merriam-Webster dictionary it said anyone with dark skin. That's how much the definition has changed over the years. The part of the joke that's real is that there was a really strong resentment of my academic excellence. And I always thought that was ironic because I wouldn't have gotten straight A's if I didn't feel like I had to in order to represent my race well. Whenever I came home with bruises, my mom used to say, "Suan, when you are brown in America, you must do better than your best." Ways to cope with racism. Number 1, exquisite self-care. Yes, I said exquisite self-care. I actually got the term exquisite self-care from an amazing author that I know named Andrea Canaan. And I'm going to link to a book that I think you'll like below in the description box where she has some work included. It's called This Bridge Called My Back, Radical Writings by Women of Color. If you're digging the vibe of our tribe, like, share, and subscribe. Self-care can look really different depending on who you are. Everybody needs a little something different. For me, the basics include sleeping well, resting when I'm tired, eating really nutritious, delicious food, spending time in nature, going to the beach, going to the park, walking by the lake, even just sitting in my yard if I can't get further from it. All of these things are really helpful for me. I spend time with loved ones, and most importantly, I'm kind to me. Also, part of my self-care is continually working on my healing and protecting myself from re-traumatization. Because let's face it, dealing with racism in America is traumatizing. In fact, I'm also going to link to some work below by Joy DeGruy. Down in the description box, look for a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. If you haven't read it, if you haven't experienced Joy DeGruy yet, please do yourself a favor and click on the link to her website or to her book, okay? Because that can really be a helpful medicine for dealing with your feelings about racism. Number 2, get spiritually grounded. That means really connected to whoever your higher power is, so that you won't be so blown around by the insanity in the environment. Okay? Try to get connected. It doesn't really matter who your higher power is, as long as you strengthen that connection that you have with them. This could mean spending time in nature, going to your church, spending time with loved ones. It could mean just spending 10 minutes every morning being quiet and listening for guidance. Because I believe there is guidance all around us that can help us in our healing process or even just in our day-to-day life. But we're often too distracted by the other noise in our head to hear the guidance. And one way you can know whether you're very strongly connected or your connection to your higher power needs more work is if you trust. If you really trust that everything's going to be okay, then you probably have a strong connection with your higher power. If you're in fear and feeling a lot of anxiety, that connection could use a little more work. Lastly, I suggest that you get as much emotional and social support as you can to cope with life in America. For me, that means reaching out to friends and family and talking about issues of race when they get overwhelming for me to address on my own. If your friends and family aren't available, I'm going to link below in the description box a few free resources for support and a couple of paid ones, and you're welcome to any of them. Please share them with your friends if you feel like they're getting overwhelmed by their feelings about race and they don't have enough people to process that with. Now it's your turn, Hopeful Tribe. How do you deal with racism? Lend someone hope in the comments below. Tell them how you deal with racism. If you're digging the vibe of our tribe, like, share, and subscribe. And please come back on Wednesday when we'll have an episode about how to be a good ally.